Hey guys, welcome back. So today I brought home these three machines. We've got a rigid 3600 watt generator, a Honda EU2000, and a Toro recycler. The person selling this was moving and none of these machines worked and he didn't want to take them with him. So he listed them on Craigslist for only $100 each. So yeah, I didn't ask too many questions other than when can I get them? And by the sound of it, there were a few people en route. So thankfully, I got there before they did and managed to get these home. Anyway, each one of these I think will be a separate video. For today, I do want to look at this Honda EU2000 because this machine alone, if it runs, will pay for the whole lot and then some. So let me get you set up a little bit better and get going on this. So right off, I can tell we are missing a few things. We don't have the cover for the Airbox or either of the filters. The machine did come with the outer cover, so that is a good thing. This also has the exact model number right here. So without that, ordering parts would be a little difficult. Anyway, let's start with the basics. Check the oil. And there's oil in the machine. It actually looks clean. So that is a good sign. Let's see if there's any fuel in the tank. Yep, there is fuel in there. Doesn't smell bad though. I mean, it should be drained. But for now, I think we'll leave that alone. And let's check the carburetor. There is a drain on the carb, so let's just crack that screw, see what comes out. All right, let's see what's in here. And that would be nothing. So the carb is dry. Either that or it's so bad it won't come out the drain. But let's give it the benefit of the doubt. We've got fuel, we've got oil, and we've got a carb without a bunch of old fuel in it. So let's try to start it. All right, let's give this a try. I did just clean the Airbox a little bit to get all the dust out from this immediate area and checked for a nest. There doesn't seem to be. So we'll turn the fuel on, tank vent on, choke on, and turn the eco switch off, which it already is. So let's see what we get. Ooh, almost. Well, to be honest, I thought this was going to be a little more work. I didn't think it would start, and it did. It wouldn't run with the choke off. Right now it's about halfway, but it does run. It makes power, and the throttle seems to respond just fine when I turn the eco switch back on. So we know everything works. We just have a fuel problem. So let's get the Airbox off. We'll get the carb off up on the bench and clean it up. All right, let's get the Airbox off. There's one bolt right here, and then the two holding the carburetor on. We need to remove the breather. And once the breather is off, the airbox should be free, although it is stuck to the carburetor. So if you just tap it a few times, maybe with a bigger screwdriver, it will usually break it free without damaging the gasket. Yeah, and that gasket is perfectly fine. It can be reused. So we just need to get the fuel line off, and then we need to disconnect the wires from the servo. It looks like someone may have been in here at one point, because this piece should be slid down a little further and clipped into there. And it was not. So I don't know if someone's had this open before, or maybe they were just thinking about it. Just slide this forward. And there's a couple tabs going around this cap. When they're released, the cap comes off. You can see the servo. And the wire. This plug just lifts out. And I think we're free. So before doing anything with this, the servo does need to come off, because I'm going to soak this in the ultrasonic, and this cannot get wet. Also, to get the pilot jet out, I guess technically you could leave this on and just clean the pilot, which is what I think is dirty here. But I think I'm going to take it fully apart and get it soaked. So I'm going to use a JIS screwdriver and hopefully break these screws free, but they don't like to come free without a little bit of hammering from the impact. So let me try that instead. So there's one, and the other one I think is too deep, at least for this attachment. Let me try a different one. Let's try this one. It's a lot thinner. And there we go. Before you take the servo off, just take note of how it's connected to the throttle plate. There is a spring right there, and the servo goes into this piece of plastic which is connected to the spring, and technically there's no physical connection. So you want to make sure you know how it goes back together, and just be careful when lifting it off that you don't lose that spring. And there's a better look at it. This piece just comes out. So best to do it now. And that's it. Now it's a normal carb, same as any other. I think that's a 10 mil. Let's try that. Yeah, there's a bit of junk in the bowl. Not much. It actually looks like someone scraped it a bit. So yeah, someone has probably been in here at one point. let's get this line out of the way. Get the pin out, needle and float. Got a main jet in there, we'll get that out in a second. And let's remove this idle set screw, which is only a couple turns in. I mean, a couple threads sticking out. So just take note of that when you put it back together. You shouldn't need this to set the idle speed. This is servo controlled by a computer. And that physical stop for the throttle shouldn't be needed in this case. And this is the pilot. This is what I suspect is most likely clogged. And the main jet and the emulsion tube are in here. And it looks like it's coming out. And that's the emulsion tube. And that's it. So this thing is completely apart. I'm just gonna run through all these passages, make sure there's no blockages, and then we'll put it through the ultrasonic and reassemble. Pilot did not feel like it was clogged. Main jet might be a little. Actually, it seemed fine. So I don't think we had a clogged jet. So most likely there could be an internal blockage here. Not sure. But we'll just go through all the passages and make sure they're open. And anything I can't get, the ultrasonic should clean up. Cleaned up pretty well. Not that it was that bad to begin with. Doesn't take much though to cause a run issue, and this one was running. It was starving a little for fuel, so hopefully we've corrected that issue. So let's get the emulsion tube in and the main jet. Just snug that down. Okay, then we'll do the bowl, and usually the drain goes opposite the fuel inlet. On this one, the drain goes this way. You want it facing forward, so when you take the cover off the unit, you can open up that screw to drain it out. Okay, and now the pilot jet. Make sure it seats fully. And that is not going down, so let's pop it out and just turn it 180 degrees. It shouldn't matter which way it goes in, but I find that if it doesn't go in, if you rotate it and try again, it might work. In this case, it's not seating. And it has to seat. So I'm going to add just a little bit of WD-40 to help it go into place. And there, went right in place. Put this idle set screw back in. And only turn it until about 2 threads poke through the other side. Like that. And now the tricky part. We need to get this back in without losing the spring. Like that. And then the servo goes on top, and this has to go into that. Like that. And you want to open this to full throttle. That is the position it should be in when the engine shuts down. If you put it together and you leave it closed, you're going to have a really hard time starting the machine. So full throttle is what Honda says to do. So that is how I'm going to do it. And we just need to tighten that down and we should be good. Okay, let's try it out. So while the carb was cleaning, I spent some time just cleaning all the grime off of everything I could reach. And I also ran the Airbox through the Ultrasonic. So that is nice and clean and ready to go. And I also realized earlier when I put the bowl on, I actually put it 180 degrees off. So this drain right here should be in the front. Otherwise, if I put it on like that, you can't access that screw to drain the bowl. So we'll just turn that around like that and tighten it down. All right, let's get the servo plugged in. This wire is held like that on this bracket. And then you have to carefully get this cap back on without pinching any wires. Like that. And then we can put the car back in place. Get that fuel line plugged back in. And finally, the airbox. So hopefully it doesn't run lean after cleaning it. But without the air filters and the cover, it might still run lean. We might need to get that to know for sure if things are going to run right. I'm going to torque these to 60 inch-pounds. I think the Honda spec is a little higher. I don't think it's needed, though. So I just realized my normal microphone decided to stop working. Hopefully the backup audio was working, otherwise you may not have heard anything for quite a while. Anyway, a dental pick, clean the contacts on the mic, and I think we're back in business. Hopefully the same can be said about this generator. So the fuel's already on, we'll turn the choke on. Now we're just going to take a few pulls to prime the pump and fill the bowl, which is fine. I just want to see once it's running that I can turn that choke off fully. Scared me there for a second. I turned the choke off and the engine went to stall, so I had to turn the choke back on for a few more seconds, and then I was able to fully turn it off. And I was able to throttle the engine down and back up several times without issue. The carb did not stumble. Things ran as they should. So I think the carb is all set. And it's only going to get better when I add the missing filters and cover, plus the fuel. We don't know how old that is. So I think what I'm going to do now is just pause it, get these parts ordered, and while waiting for those to show up, we'll swap out the fuel with some fresh stuff, and we'll do an oil change, and of course, clean this mess off the machine. All right, let's see if I can use this siphon to get most of that old fuel out. It doesn't look too bad, actually. Better to be safe than sorry, though. I'm not sure how long it's been in there. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a bit of water right at the bottom. Not a lot, but it makes me wonder if there's more down there. So it's not easy to drain the tank completely. So I think I'm just going to use some towels or just try to mop up what's left and then fill it back up with some fresh stuff. Yeah, that should be good. Before I change the oil, I'm going to run the engine just a bit longer to get a little more heat in it. So we'll get it started. We'll put a 750 watt load on it for a few minutes and then get that oil changed out. This engine only takes about 400 milliliters of oil. And this tube here, this did not come with the Honda. This is something I ordered extra. It's fairly universal and makes changing and filling the oil on these pretty painless. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, the oil that came out didn't look that bad, actually. I'd say it doesn't have a lot of hours on it. You know, regardless, I'm not sure the quality or the grade of this oil. So it's always good to swap the oil out, especially on an unknown piece of equipment like this. I also put in 400 milliliters and only about 300 came out. So it was a little bit low. Anyway, there's not much more left to do for now. I am waiting on these parts still. For now, I'm just going to get the outer cover on and clean the exterior. A little bit of junk in here. All the parts showed up today. We've got the airbox cover and the bolt. Those are separate parts. And the two air filters. So according to the manual, you are supposed to oil these foam filters. I've actually already oiled this one a bit. But the general idea is you just want to saturate the foam filter. You want to soak it in oil. Work it in, and then squeeze out the excess. You don't want to over saturate it because you will choke out the engine, but you want to make sure you work it completely through that filter, and that's going to help it capture the dirt and keep it from entering the engine. And we'll do the same for this one. Then completely work it in. Put a little on the other side. And don't be afraid to overdo it. You can just soak it out with a towel. I think I'm pretty much ready to go. I've got 1500 watts of load on standby. And when you factor in that 70 watt light bulb, that's going to bring us pretty close to the max rated watts of 1600. So the plan is we'll just get the engine started, let it warm up, we'll double check the outputs. If everything looks good, we'll bring it up to a 750 watt load, and then finally 1500 watts. Sine wave looks pretty good, and we're at 0.4% THD. No issues at 750 watts. The sine wave looks great. The THD actually went down a little to 0.3%. At 1500 watts, actually closer to 1600 watts, that sine wave continues to look perfect. And surprisingly, the THD has not moved. We're at 0.3% still. Not too bad. No issues to report. It started right up and had no issues handling the load. The output was very clean. We actually started at 0.4% THD, and under 1500 watts, that actually came down to 0.3%. So from a power standpoint, we're doing well. You know, the engine not smoking, not making funny noises, and had plenty of horsepower to power that load. So I think at this point we are pretty much done. You know, that said, I did fix another Honda EU2000 recently. The other one was actually thrown away and was smoking quite bad. So I do have two of these, and I have a parallel kit. Now, this is not a Honda sanctioned kit. This is actually for a Yamaha EF2000, which is also a 1600 watt machine. Those banana plugs fit in there perfectly. So I see no reason why we can't use that parallel kit to combine these two for 3200 watts. So I'm going to spend a minute, we'll connect them together, we'll start it up and try it out. I've got to admit, the idea of doing this makes me a bit nervous. You're really relying on the inverter to synchronize the output. The hertz, the voltage, and of course the sine wave also needs to be in sync. If you were to do this on a traditional generator and just hook it up haphazard, you know, bad things would happen because most likely the voltages are different, the engine speeds are different, and of course, if the sine waves are peaking at different times, then what's going to happen is you're going to get current flowing between the generators instead of running your load. So in this case, the inverters do all the work for you. So I've got everything plugged in, so we'll just get these started. Hopefully everything comes online, and then we'll put 3000 watts on and see how it does. So far so good. We are online. We have 2 green lights. So, you know, the output, I already checked it real quick. The sine wave looks to be really clean. And the THD, surprisingly, is even lower. We're at 0.1%. So let's bring on the 3000 watt load and see what the output looks like. We're at 1500 watts, and the engines, they barely even noticed. You know, if this was one machine, it would be pretty much at max speed. You know, the sine wave continues to look very good, and the THD, we're only at 0.2%. So let's bring on the other space heater. We'll bring it up to 3000 watts and see how it does. Now pulling 3000 watts and no issues to report. I guess the only observation is that under 1500 watts both engines were running at the same speed. Now under 3000 watts they're not quite in sync as far as the speed goes. You know, that said, it shouldn't matter too much because the inverter is doing all the work to keep the Hertz in sync. So let's double check the sine wave. Looks pretty good. I'll put it up on the screen because there's a lot of glare. And the THD, not too bad, 0.4%. Yeah, I've got to admit, I've always been a little skeptical as to why you would want to do this instead of buying a larger EU3000. But now that I've paralleled 2 smaller generators, I can kind of see the advantages to it. You know, of course, an EU3000 weighs quite a bit more. And if you only need, say, 1600 watts and you're running a larger machine, it's going to burn more fuel. So with this setup, you have the option, if you don't need the full power, you can just run one of these to get by. And of course, you have a backup if something goes wrong and you're not left in the dark. And if you do need 3000 watts, you just plug in the parallel cables and you are good to go. Anyway, you know, I think this video is pretty much a wrap. In the machine on the right, that is the one we just fixed, and it didn't really need a whole lot. So, you know, I want to say I made out on the deal. You know, of course, we have 2 other pieces of equipment to fix. And that rigid generator, I think, is going to be quite a bit of work. So, yeah, that video will be forthcoming, hopefully next week, if not in the near future. So, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.